Mr. President, last week we heard you say that you want to move as fast as humanly possible about that. So this event begins and ends with the community. It begins with the loss the community felt, and it ends with the recovery of commerce to the community. On the very first day, we had multiple folks in the community that were first responders, people that are first responders for the city, the county, the state, and at the federal level. And they all came together in this very space to form our unified command. Set out some principles and priorities for us to follow. And the number one thing that we started with was to do search and rescue for potential survivors and victims. And then we wanted to ensure that we protected the port and Maryland from any potential threats. And in that case, we have how do we bring commerce to the Port of Baltimore? And then the fourth line of effort, sir, was really how do we support the investigation? And that's really how do we ensure we're collaborating with them, sir, so that the investigation does not interfere with salvage operations, and salvage operations do not interfere with the investigation. Over the top of all that, sir, is our number one priority, and that was safety of the public and safety of the first responders. Sir, on the restoration of commerce to the Port of Baltimore, there are three major efforts. The first of those is to clear the federal channel. That's located right here, and General Lloyd will brief you on that in just a second. The second part of that is we want to remove the ship, sir, and that'll be the second thing we do. And then the third thing is we want to continue to clear the bridge debris from the waterway, sir. In addition to that, as part of our efforts to restore commerce, we have opened two alternate channels. Those are smaller draft vessels, tugs and barges, and combined with the Trade Point facility, that's going to equate to about 15% of commerce that had moved through the port previously is now reopened, sir. And so there's a channel to the north, just under the first standing span on that side, that's an 11-foot draft, and there's a channel to the south, and that's a 14-foot draft. And again, those are for smaller tugs and barges to come in and out of the port. And then our plan is to continually, as we get sections of the bridge removed and waterways open, to continue to open either alternate channels or put in place restrictions so that we can continue to increase the amount of commerce that can flow in and out of the port at those stages, sir. So now I'd like to turn it over to General Lloyd, sir.
Thanks, sir. Sir, I'm Brigadier General John Lloyd. I command the North Atlantic Division for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. You gave us the priority to open the federal channel. Sir, honored to serve. Absolutely. You gave us the priority to open the federal channel again and get the Port of Baltimore operational. What I can tell you, sir, is I am extremely confident we are going to make that happen. And why do I say that? Two reasons. First, the mobilization of people and equipment, the best I've seen, Mr. President, team on the ground. We were able to have an agreement with the Navy and the supervisor of salvage, immediately in place, and mobilize that asset to get them on site. At the same time, the state of Maryland was mobilizing their assets to work on the non-federal channel, along with the cooperation. Again, the best I have seen with this team in the Unified Command with the Coast Guard and our partners. The second, technical and engineer expertise. Competency they bring to do salvage operations is absolutely the best in the business at doing this. We're going to focus in two areas to open up the federal channel. First, Mr. President, we're going to open a limited access channel, 280 feet wide, 35 feet deep, by removing this section, and I'll just point it over here for you, Mr. President. This is the section I'm talking about right in here. Both what's above the water and then below the water that I'll talk to in a minute, all the wreckage and debris is going to get us to those dimensions to allow vessel traffic back into the port. Historically, about 80% of vessels coming into the port will be able to use that 280 foot by 35 foot channel that we're going to open, 74% of outbound traffic. So that's good.
Will this be removed in the meantime?
Sir, great question, Mr. President. So nothing that we are doing is happening sequentially. Everything in this operation is happening at the same time through all the salvage operations. So the work that the state of Maryland is doing outside of the channel, inside the federal channel with our contractors, they are engineering solutions and coming up with those solutions to remove all of it simultaneously. So for this section that you point out, Mr. President, just to give you reference, this is the section sitting on the vessel dolly. That section, I think General Spellman may have briefed you, about 5,000 tons, 120 feet high. Mr. President, I have been out there and looked at it, and it is a lot of bridge resting on that vessel. The salvage experts are working right now to engineer a solution to cut that section vessel and lift it. Get that done. The vessel will be able to be refloated and recovered out of the channel. Right now, the majority of it is sitting out of the federal channel. It'll get out of the way. We will remove the rest of the wreckage, Mr. President, and we will open up the federal channel. So I want to talk to you about what you can't see under the water now. So you can see and look at all the wreckage above the water, and that's very clear. So what you're looking at now, Mr. President, is a 3D scan of underwater. Again, as a reference point, the red is above the water, and it's this section sitting right here. Below the water, the debris and wreckage is sitting in the 50-foot channel. This cross section is right what you're looking at there, Mr. President. It has been described by the salvage expert and the divers that wreckage is a mangled mess down there of a lot of steel and a lot of force on that.
Steel?
This is steel, concrete, and debris at the bottom, Mr. President. Yeah, absolutely. So I want to talk to you about the great work that the divers are doing down in a very dangerous environment in that wreckage. The divers go down, they are tethered to a barge, and with zero visibility, they are working in this environment with someone talking into their ear on the surface and guiding them in the channel amongst the debris where they can't see. They do a lot of it by feel. And what they are collecting is the data to determine how we are going to cut and lift all the wreckage and debris out of the channel. Mr. President, I'm going to go back here.
One more question.
Yes, sir.
This is broken. This is separate.
Sir, it is.
Gotcha.
And that's a great question as well. When we were first looking at it and what the data has shown us by sending divers into waters to make the determination that this is separated here, which once we made that determination, that is helping us then get that limited access channel that I talked about. So I've got 51 divers on the team, 12 cranes on site. I have everything I need to get this federal channel back open for you in the nation.
Other places are amazing.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
They really are.
Sir, do you have any other questions?
No, I don't.
The cooperation is fantastic. The best I've seen, Mr. President.
You got the best cover in the world.
And Mr. President, that unified command approach is really what allowing us to move as quickly as we are, because each agency brings to bear their authorities, their expertise, their capabilities, and their equipment, and we merge them together so that we create unity of effort and coordination and collaboration throughout. And that creates speed in any major response, sir. And this team is working great, sir. Yes, sir.
Governor's a former Army guy, too, Mr. President, so it makes it easy to work with.
I was trained well.
Yes, sir.
This guy's got guns as big as my thigh.
President, so I'll take you over to the next brief unless you have
Sir.
other questions, sir.
Oh, I'm honored, Mr. President. Thank you for the opportunity.
You're the best in the world.
Thanks, sir. We're going to get this done. Thanks, sir. Thanks, sir.
You want me right here?
Yes, sir.
You, sir. Nice to see you again. Mr. President, three things I wanted to give you. We're going to take a little further lens, if we could.
I want to give you a sense of the impact that this has had on our system, both our highway system and our port system. I want to talk about the immediate actions that we've been taking, and then I want to talk about rebuilding the bridge. So just big picture, sir, this is the Baltimore area, this is the Baltimore Beltway, this is the Francis Scott Key Bridge, which is here. We have 3 crossings of the harbor, Francis Scott Key Bridge, Baltimore Harbor Tunnel, and Fort McHenry, roughly 250,000 vehicles a day.
Oh, it's one of those vehicles about 1,000 times.
I know. And thank you for the toll, sir.
We did stop and pay the toll, so I want you to know that.
So as you can see, this bridge serves both communities and particularly the workers that work in this area. So that's a challenge that we will have going forward. It is a relief valve for these 2 bridges and actually the Beltway. If anything happens on the Beltway, people then gravitate to these 3 sources, obviously the 2 tunnels as well. And it's also the hazmat route. So any vehicles that are too high, too wide, or with dangerous materials, they use this facility. Now they can't do it. They can't go through the harbor tunnels. So now they have to go around the Beltway. So that's adding roughly about 30 minutes in time for that, and obviously create some other issues for that. So those are types of things we're dealing with on the highway system. In terms of the port itself, clearly we have roughly 8,000 people a day that would show up in those locations every day to report to work, 20,000 that were dependent upon the Port of Baltimore, and roughly 50,000 in total that were supported by the Port of Baltimore. Huge economic impact, not only here, but nationally. Roughly 27 states that we serve directly out of here, all the way out to the Dakotas with service. The #1 auto, as you know, the #1 auto processing unit in the United States. About 15% of all autos come through here into Baltimore. And all the heavy equipment, meaning farm equipment, big construction equipment, comes through here. Over 30% of that comes. Some of the immediate actions, our police officer here you're going to meet in a minute, they were the first on the scene. They basically stopped traffic from something much worse. They went out and rescued a gentleman from the wreckage, and basically our dispatchers were professional all the way through and made sure that service was out there immediately and maintained. They've done a fantastic job. We initiated the Unified Command actually in this very building. They're just sitting in this room roughly by about 2:30, about 3 o'clock in the morning. This was where the central heartbeat was, where we ran the whole operation, particularly with the Maryland Transportation Authority police running that. Then we mobilized. We were fortunate we had a company that was on contract. We immediately got them out here with cranes, with barges, with men. They knew how to do this. And then working through Unified Command, they've been basically opening those smaller channels. So they've been doing that. We will continue to work with our partners on the outside. We have trade, which is just outside of the impacted area, in effect, both to stage where we're going to put salvage, but also to try to get more jobs and keep things flowing through the port until it's totally open. The $60 million that we got through emergency relief is what's funding all that. So those openings that you saw earlier, that was just pointed out, that was done with that $60 million. The traffic issues that we're dealing with was that $60 million. So thank you so much. We could not have gotten onto this as quickly as we did without that $60 million. In terms of rebuilding, we're working very closely with the Federal Highway Administration. Basically, now how do we get this done as quickly as we can and environmentally as we can to deal with the new standards that we'll have to meet with this? Let's get all that lined up now so that we can get this thing open as quickly as we can, because we got to serve those people that work here at the port and the region as a whole. With that, I'll turn it over to the Secretary Buttigieg.
Thanks, Paul. So, Mr. President, on day one, you directed us to do everything possible to support the state of Maryland from a DOT perspective. That has mainly meant supporting the Maryland DOT on 4 lines of effort. Help them get the port back open, deal with the supply chain implications in the meantime, help them get the bridge back up, and deal with the surface traffic implications in the meantime. As Paul mentioned, the $60 million was the first wave of emergency relief funding. We were able to turn that around within hours of it coming in. That is a down payment and just the beginning, but as more requests come in, we'll make sure that we can turn them around right away too. When it comes to supply chains, a number of the mechanisms that you established to deal with the issues we had in 2021 on the West Coast are serving us well now on the East Coast. As you know, this is the top vehicle handling port that we have in the United States. The ports of Davisville, Rhode Island, as well as Virginia and Brunswick in Georgia had been able to temporarily absorb much of the traffic that would have been headed for Baltimore. But there's no long-term substitute, of course, for the work that's done right here in Baltimore. When it comes to containers, most of that's getting picked up at the Port of Virginia and New York and New Jersey. And then when it comes to heavy equipment, there are some specialized ports absorbing that traffic too. But the focus is, of course, to support Baltimore and make sure they can get back up and running. Yesterday, we were able to execute a revised grant agreement from our Maritime Administration with the County of Baltimore. That relates to the Sparrows Point Trade Point facility. You'll notice this is the only major component of the Port of Baltimore that sits outside of the blocked area. They have 10,000 vehicle per month capacity. We're going to be able to help them get up to 20,000. Basically, it requires paving about 10 acres of land here to add to their cargo laydown capacity. So by doubling that, we'll be able to provide some relief while the Army Corps and the state are getting the channel back open and traffic back to normal. We're also providing some regulatory relief on the trucking side to help with hours of service requirements for trucks that are involved in the response and any other requests that come in.
Sure, I'd like you to meet some of these great first responders that came on day one and were just tremendous, sir.